Next we look at percent, and I'm sure at some point you've calculated percent score in a test. Definitely you've paid HST or tax, so you've dealt with percents a bunch, and all percent means is that it's a number out of 100. So when we do the conversion, what we're actually doing is multiplying by 100. And what I'll do is I will begin by showing you just the direct conversion from a decimal number to a percent. So the operation is pretty simple. If we want 0.18 to be out of 100, we multiply it by 100, which the shortcut is moves the decimal place. You can verify that on a calculator, and 0.18 converts to 18%. The process is exactly the same with some of these other questions. It'll look a little different, right? But you're always multiplying by 100, so I guess I'll do one more example. If I had the number 2.1 and I want to know what that is as a percent, well, I'm going to multiply it by 100, and the result is moving the decimal place 2 to the right, 210%. We talked about in class why it's possible to have percent values greater than 100%. It definitely is. I guess the easiest example to think of is bonus marks on a test. Good news about percent is everything's about 100. So all we need to do is move decimal places usually when we're converting back and forth. If we've got the number 36%, we're supposed to write each as a decimal and round if necessary. We won't need to do that here. So writing 36% as a decimal, instead of multiplying by 100 to get a number out of 100, which is what we did to get to percent, we are now doing the opposite operation. We divide by 100 to get back to the decimal. 0.36 is the result, for example. It's the same process with everything else. If I divide 258% by 100, I'm going to get 2.58, and so on. I don't think there's anything else that we need to cover here other than multiplying by 100 to get from a decimal to a percent, and dividing by 100 to get from a percent back to a decimal. Very similar operation with fractions. Fractions is just another way to write part of a number. So a decimal represents part of a whole, and so does a fraction. So 3/5, my suggestion would be to first convert it to a decimal, which means 3 divided by 5. When you do that, you will get 0.6. And from there, to convert to a percent, what we've been doing and will continue to do always is multiply it by 100. That moves the decimal place 2 places to the right, so this will be 60%. The only other way that this will change, it doesn't really change, but what if I had a number like 1 1/4, and I want to convert that to a percent? Okay, so all I need to do again is convert this to a decimal. So 1 1/4. Okay, so let's keep the whole number 1 around first, and the part of a whole is 1/4, and when you divide 1 by 4, you get 0.25. So 1 1/4 translates to 1.25. From there, we multiply by 100 to make it a percent. Move the decimal place 2 places. We end up with 125%. And that's all we need to cover with converting fractions to percents. It's a 2-step process, but you can see how it works out. Now, this type of questions, some of them are quite straightforward and some of them are difficult. Again, we make the joke that English makes math hard. So now that we've put words into it, how do we actually solve for percents? Percents are simply a proportion out of 100. So I'm going to give you a master formula that you can use that will work for all of this type of question. And in fact, it works for any percent that you end up dealing with. Okay, so 10 is what percent of 50? So the master formula is over of is equal to percent over 100. Okay, and I'll explain more about the is over of, but the percent value is what your score would be out of 100 if we were thinking about this as a test or assignment or something. So we're saying 10 out of 50 converts to what percent out of 100. Okay, and so let's look at this question 31. I've just changed the value so that you can still practice it and try something new. So is over of is equal to percent over 100. So if we go back into the question, 10 is. So that goes up in the top left. That's going to be 10. What percent? That means that the unknown is the percent value of 50. That's the value we changed. Okay, so of goes in the bottom left, of 50, and the 100 is constant. It always stays there. What we're left with, as you'll recognize from before, is a proportion, right? So 10 out of 50 is equal to what out of 100? So a proportion, we can take advantage of the cross product rule. We can multiply up like that, and we're going to end up with 10 out of 50 times 100 is equal to our unknown. Okay, and what we get is the result being 20. All right, and 10 out of 50, if you were to divide that on a calculator, you would find that that is 0.2, which is equivalent to 20% score. So that's how you solve that type of question. All right, the next type we look at is asking for something different. All right, I've just changed 87 to 20 so that you've got a fresh question to try. And the question says, what is 80% of 20? All right, so let's try and fill in our proportion we've built over here. So what is? That means that is the unknown. All right, 80%, well, that's easy to fill in. The percent goes where the percent sign is. The 100 is always given. Of 20, okay, so we're talking about the word of 20, so we're told that that's the bottom left. All right, and there we go. We've got another proportion here with one unknown. So now 20 needs to come up to multiply by 80, divide by 100, and the result that we should get is 19. 19 out of 20 is 80%. There we go. We look at one more variation, and this one's asking us something different again, even though they look very similar. 90 is 45% of what? Okay, so this could be very confusing. So this would be the equivalent of trying to figure out what your test was out of given your score and the percent that you received. Okay, so what we're going to do is just follow the proportion that's already been set up here. So 90 is, all right, so 90 is going on top. 45%, okay, so 45 always goes where the percent sign is. Of what? This is the strange bit, so it's like we're trying to figure out what the test was out of. We now have a proportion, okay, but the unknown is on the bottom, so if you remember how to deal with that from the previous video, we're going to flip both sides of the fraction. We get question mark. Can you tell that's a question mark? Maybe. I better fix that. Okay, so question mark over 90 is equal to 100 over 45. All right, so as I move over to the right here, we'll see that 90 can come up to multiply by 100. So our unknown is now isolated, and it's equal to 90 multiplied by 100 over 45. Okay. And the result that we're going to get is 200. Okay, so 90 out of 200 is 45%, as well as 45 out of 100 is 45%. So that's it for this part. All right, so for something like question 37, we're trying to find the selling price of an item. Right, so we're going to use a new example here. If something costs $10, so its price is $10 and tax is 5%, what we need to do is just multiply the tax times the price in order to figure out how much tax is how much tax is to be charged. And then we add that back to the price. That's one way to do it. So we take our $10, all right, and we're going to multiply it by 5% tax, but when we do this, we need to convert it to a decimal because $10 is a decimal number. Percent is something different, so let's get this back to a decimal number as well. So 5%, I'm dividing by 100, 0.05, all right, And so what we should figure out is 0.50, but that's just the tax. You can't take a $10 item, add tax to it, and then pay 50 cents. That doesn't make any sense, right? So we take the original $10 that we had, we add our 50 cents to it, and the price that we would pay in that case is $10.50. Now, you don't have to necessarily understand this next bit that I'm going to talk about, but it helps if you can. We need to pay for 100% of the $10, right? We need to pay for the full $10, which is 100% of it, and then we have to add 5% tax to that. So really, another way to think about this is to say that we're paying 105% of the original price. The full $10 plus the 5%. Convert that to a decimal. 1.05 is what we can multiply $10 by, and we will end up with, in one step, oh sorry, I made a mistake. Oh no, I didn't there. Yeah, 1.05. There we go. And so what I end up with is $10.50 as the result of that calculation. And guess what? That was the same value we got in several fewer steps. So you can choose the system that you like better. Sometimes it's necessary to calculate the tax separately so you know how much you're paying. Sometimes you just want to get to the final price right away. Right, and now we'll look at discounts as well. So the original price of some item happens to be $100, and we're going to get a 10% discount on that and then pay 2% tax. All right. So the original price is $100. And from that, we're going to calculate a 10% discount. So we calculate the discount the same way, multiplying it by 10%, which converts to 0.10, right? If we convert the percent to a decimal. And so that means we are going to get, $10 as a discount. So we take the $100, subtract, we're subtracting this time instead of adding tax on, right? And so the new product result is going to be $90. So if the new selling price is $90, we need to go and add 2% tax to that. So we'll do the same process as we did before. I'll do the shortcut method. If our selling price is now $90 because it's been discounted, I'm going to multiply it by 1.02, right? 2% tax, and that keeps 100% of the price around. And so the result after we calculate it is $91.80. There we are. So it's $1.80 in tax that we're paying on $90. And the last example that we look at has markup built into it. So if you are a business, you need to mark up your prices to sell them, because the cost of running a business requires that you charge a markup. If you sold everything for the same price you bought it for, your business is not going to do very well. So here we will take a look at how to add markup. And actually, let's not complicate it. It's the same way that we add tax. It's just a percentage increase, just like tax was a percentage increase. So $100, okay, so a markup of 15%. We know that 15%. So we could either multiply it by 0.15, or we could do the shortcut method, which is we need to keep the full price around, so 100% of it plus 15% in addition. So we're going to multiply it by 1.15. And there we go. We should end up with $115 when it's all said and done, once you do the calculation. So markup works exactly the same way that tax does. Any percentage increase should work this same way.